Hello, folks. This is Oscar with Houston in Action. We're going to jump in a bit. First 5 minutes will be an open discussion with some of the facilitators so y'all can get to know who's presenting, but also so we make sure that the presentation runs smoothly as possible. All right, good morning, everybody. Again, this is Oscar Hernandez with Houston in Action. We're getting started with our presentation today. This would be for Census 2020 Community Action Academy. This is going to be our overview for virtual tactics and tools for 2020 Census outreach. We're very excited to have everyone joining us today. We're going to give folks some time to join in, but please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box if y'all want to talk to each other. So we know who's here, make some connections, catch up with old friends. That's totally fine. So chat away if you feel comfortable. We also want to make sure that that if you haven't muted yourself yet, please mute yourself. But we want to give voice to the presenters so the presenters can go through their topics and that we're all properly informed and that we're connecting. If you want to come in and ask a question at any point, we will have a Q&A section at the end. So I ask to either type in all your questions in the chat portion or to wait for the Q&A. And before you say your name, we would like for you, before you ask your question, we would like for you to say your name. So that way we can keep track of who's asking the question so we can have a fruitful conversation. So we have a quick check-in question for today, as we always do in Houston in Action. The best way to answer this second question is through the chat option box. The question we have is, what values are you practicing to keep close to your communities in this time of social distancing? I know it's a mouthful, but we want to keep close. So if there's any values you are practicing, please share it to the chat box and we're more than happy to hear from you. We'll let folks answer the check-in question. While the check-in question is happening, we'll also be waiting for other folks who might jump in a little late. So Joy, if you want to highlight any questions that are coming in for us. Or any check-in responses to the check-in question, Joy?
So some people doing a lot of staying connected virtually, Facebook and emails, love that. Some people doing some great one-on-ones with their donors and community members, making sure they're keeping connected with their needs and how to be accessible.
Awesome. A thing we practiced yesterday, we actually had a virtual karaoke with a couple of friends. So that was kind of fun. Very difficult, but kind of fun. So if y'all want to practice something, continue to have fun practices with the community. I might host one, and if y'all want to join, keep an eye out for that. So that way you can laugh at us from your comfortability of your house. So for today, again, if anyone is still struggling to join, please text or call or email Joy at joy@houstonaction.org. Also, our phone number is 713-817-3842. Please only limit yourself to this conversation. It's okay with her to speak with her afterwards. And then with the phone number, and she can try to connect y'all 3 ways. So she'll be able to call in through Zoom, and if you can't hear the audio, she'll be able to connect. Thank you so much. So for today, the agenda, we did the small introductions and welcome. We're going to be using go over the different facets of how to use and request access from Houston in Action. At that point, Mario, can you make sure Chris is on the line so we can cover it? We also want to make sure that we go over the general overview of tactics that different groups are working on, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A portion. So, but before we get started, we wanted to go over our community agreements. So as you know, Houston in Action has community agreements and working principles that we work off of, and that our principles are how we ground ourselves in the work that we're doing. I'm only going to read 1 or 2 of them, but we would like for everyone to be able to read them and think about these working principles as we move forward. I know the one we tend to focus a lot in Houston in Action is around equity and systems level change, which means maintaining a focus on equity and achieving systems level change. That is an open, bigger discussion for how we achieve the systems level change for everybody to make sure that it's not just accessibility, but that we have a systems that change that actually represents and give equity into our community. And everyone has a voice, especially in this space. We want to make sure that everyone does have a voice and that you can share your voice in this space. And that we were able to support your efforts, even if it's from afar. We also want to make sure that for folks who are in this space to keep to the norms that we have for our discussion here. If at any point you want to make a question, please type it into the chat box first. We do have a Q&A at the end, but if anyone has like a burning thing that they want to share, make sure you say your name before you share the question. We're trying our best to give people some time in between speakers to make sure that people are hearing them. But Joy will do her best to capture the questions, and then we'll be able to follow up at the Q&A portion at the end. Okay. So, oh, 1 second. So before we move on to the next portion, is Chris with us, Mario, at the moment? Okay, so I'm gonna go through some of the processes that we're gonna use in order for us to move forward with our accessibility to Houston in Action materials. So we want to make sure that everything we provide, sorry, that I'm gonna mute somebody, I think, if I can, just to make sure that noise please make sure that just know that if you're making a lot of noise, to mute yourself if you're not on mute already. And also, if I mute you, don't take it personal. It's just making sure that everyone can listen, okay? All right, just making sure we have everyone in mind. Okay. So Houston in Action, we're requesting Houston in Action resources. We currently have, like you all are accessing right now through Zoom, and we want to make it accessible to our partners and our members. So you will be able to make requests for this if this is a tool that which you do not have. We're looking into different platforms as well to what are the best tools to support folks with their, either it's phone banking, either it's text banking, virtual hangouts and trainings. We want to have access to all these different tools. We have access to a lot of different tools, and we want to make sure that they're accessible to you. We would also love to hear from y'all if there's a tool that you think that isn't being used that might be able to benefit the work here, and then we can figure out a way of whether we can access it. To request access to the Zoom Houston Action Zoom account, there's a variety of ways to do it. The 3 people to contact would be Chris at houstonaction.org, Anna McNaught at anna@houstonaction.org, or myself, Oscar at houstonaction.org. And the way this process is going to work is that you will send a time and date when you would like to use our Zoom account. We will check the calendar to see if that time and date is open. Our hope is to also help people schedule their trainings and what they're using it for, so folks aren't competing for an audience. So that way we can have a time and place where folks are not trying to pay attention to multiple things that are going on. After you make that request and we find out that the calendar is open, we will send you the login and password information, so you can go into the Zoom, the partners account, and then you can update all the information as needed. If you need a step-by-step process and how to make an event in Zoom, know that we will provide that for you. We don't have everything from HiA's point right now, but we will make sure that that's available through some general videos through Zoom, and we can support you, but we're really expecting for those who request access to our Zoom account to fill out the different information required to make that Zoom presentation. And the way we actually shifted, as everyone is aware, COVID is, I've been freaking out a little bit about it. I'm doing my best to work from home. It's been a challenge as much as it's been fun. But we know that means for a lot of our outreach events, our strategies and tactics have changed. And they've changed a lot. And what does our work look like? Even for folks that I've talked to who do a lot of digital organizing, digital work, this is still even a little different considering the work that was done before. And in that same spirit, we know that a lot of different organizations are gonna change their tactics from doing out in community events, as Houston was actually, we have the stay that was put in place last night. So all of these things have to change. But we still want to highlight and support you making these events on our website. So the way to do that, if you go to houstoniнаction.org/partners, you can use this form to submit an online event for countywide promotion. You can go through our events page as well at houstoniнаction.org. And if you click on events on houstoniнаction.org, you can actually sign up and see the list of all the events that are happening in Houston. Every event that we have there might have an address, but once you see the description, it's either going to have a Zoom account information or a Google Hangout or a Facebook Live. It's going to give more details on how people can participate virtually. So we want to support everybody, especially as we move forward to Census Week. We want to be able to support folks to log in our platforms and to be able to highlight that these events are happening. So if you have any questions around that, please email chris@houstoniнаction.org. Any thoughts or questions, please feel add them in the chat box. Are we good? Thumbs up. Nice. I feel like,
could you just speak a little slowly, please?
Oh, of course. Sorry about that. So I try to move over a little slower. And that also, thank you for bringing that up for our presenters as well. If we keep in mind the people we want to listen, we want to speak a little slower so people can keep up. And I'm sorry, I had some coffee right before we got started, and I think it's kicking in. So, okay. For today, oops, sorry about that. For today, what we currently have, okay, overview of tactics and tools for Census 2020. So I would like to thank our partners for joining us and presenting. There will be 7-minute segments coming in from the different subjects that we're going to be talking about. The first presenter is Jolt, from Jolt, Move Texas, Texas Freedom Network, Texas Civil Rights Project, Interfaith Ministries, and United We Dream, Miloja. So I love hearing from our partners. Y'all are the experts in the field. Y'all also are active with the community, and we're very, very lucky and fortunate to be working with all of you. So by all means, please make sure to uplift your work and make sure that everyone's here can understand and also know how to connect with you afterwards. So without further ado, we have our first presenter, Maria from Jolt.
Good morning, everyone. Maria Tolentino, the organizing director with Jolt. I'm going to go over some best practices that we use at Jolt for our social media tactics. And then Leslie Hernandez, our amazing census organizer, will go over some events that we will be hosting for our April 1st Census Week campaigns. And then at the end, we will show just one of our many census videos. So I hope that the information that we provide today is very useful. All right, so we're going to go over a couple of best practices. And putting this together, it was just so much information that I would love to share with you guys, and that we're hoping that later on we can create something a little bit more in length, but we kind of narrow down the information to these 6 best practices that we use. And so knowing your audience, I know that social media can be very overwhelming. However, if you find a target audience, depending on your campaigns, it's easier for you to market information so that you're able to not only define your target audience, but you're also able to define the platforms that you use. So knowing your audience and your social media platforms is really, really important. In the chat in a couple of minutes, I'll drop a link to a guide to social media that I found amazingly using Pinterest. It defines each of the social media platforms and the target demographic. The more you work with your target audience insights, it's going to be easier for you to customize your campaigns. The information that you will, that will even lead you to the right channels and strategies for sharing your message. If you're reaching out to local demographics, things that we think about Facebook, and it's just a general posting on our social media sites, but using like Facebook groups, searching different Facebook groups that fit your demographics. I've even heard of Craigslist being used and local apps like Nextdoor. Those are tools that'll help you build your social media target audiences. The question is, sometimes we have a target audience. Is it okay for us to have several targeted audiences? And that's completely okay. Just you want to customize each of your campaigns to make sure that it matches your target audience. So each campaign should have a set target audience when you launch those. A high visual audience may respond sometimes well to like Instagram campaigns. So if you're using graphics with a lot of visual content, short videos, we found that Instagram and Facebook stories also work really well with us. If you're doing direct marketing messaging, Twitter is the social media platform that we use for that. And Instagram usually targets younger demographics, like I said before, using stories. If you're going to do call to actions, then Facebook would be your platform. But I will drop a link here in just a couple of minutes in the chat, so it kind of gives you a guide and overview. Our next best practice is using culturally relevant content. Embrace authenticity. If you keep a consistent message and use real narratives, images, contents that are relatable to your audience, I think that the images that you put out resonate with your communities and your target audiences. So Jolt's brand consists of high use of vibrant colors, art. We do have artists in residence that we work with that for the bigger campaigns that we use that create visual arts custom to Jolt. But on a day-to-day basis, we use different tools to help us, have those colorful content visuals that'll help us tell a story. Storytelling is one of the things that we really rely on. When we create those personal connections with our community, it resonates with them and helps us share the stories among social media outlets. Balancing content, having a good mixture of content depending on the platform. For Joel, we've noticed that short form videos are amongst the most shared content on our social media. So we try to keep, depending on the platform that you're using, we use a lot of Instagram stories, 1 to 2 minute stories, something not too in detail depending on your social media platform, just to get the audience's attention and keep coming back for more of the content. So recently we did an analysis, and our press releases, which were very wordy, where we weren't really getting a whole lot of traction. So we converted those written documents into audio documents with some good visual aids, and that's really helped us boost some of our engagement. So maybe looking at the tactics, and we'll talk a little bit more about using data to analyze. Some of the useful tools and platforms that we use, again, I mentioned before, using our artist in residence programs for the bigger campaigns, they're able to really showcase some of the work that we have. Canva is a tool that we use. They already have formats and templates that we can use that are colorful and really fit our brand. Keeping organized and consistent, because you're going to create multiple types of content. You want to be able to use a calendar to organize your events. Consistency is a building block of the brand. Is consistency. It takes 5 to 7 impressions for people to begin to recognize your brand. So repetition is important. Key brand ingredients like your logo, your color, and your typeface is essential. The other thing is to embrace automation. There's software out there that that help you post, like Hootsuite, and we've just now ventured into chatbots. Using relevant hashtags in order to improve the reach. Use hashtags that are trending. I know Twitter has a section on the right-hand side on the home screen that shows you a list of trending hashtags. So using those across social media. Taking time to analyze your data, take a look at the posts that do well, and then try to structure those same posts depending on your target audience. I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to our wonderful census organizers that'll go over some of the census week activities.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi. Thank you guys for having us so much. Like Maria said, we've been working really hard these last couple of weeks to see what our platform and what our content is going to be. And honestly, this census information kind of fit in perfectly with the digital organizing strategy that we were talking about. So a couple of things that we've been putting out is, and we have ideas to put out, is on Census Day, we'll be hosting a webinar on anything census related, whether that be platform on like a Zoom meeting or like a Facebook Live. But we're thinking about giving like a 30 to 35-minute training on all things census, what the census is, why it's important that we participate, and like what's going to be on it and what's not. This week, we've come up with a strategy kind of on our social media on Instagram. We're dropping a week long of Insta story videos to give like a week long training on the census. So Monday we released the video. I shot a quick 2 to 3 minute video about like what our next steps are with Joel as far as organizing and moving towards digital organizing. I also shared that the census is live and that this is the perfect time to take it. We were able to link the my2020census.gov link right after the video so that once you're finished watching it, people can just hit that link and go directly to, if you can go back real quick.
If you could run through it real quick, because we want to make sure we have time for all the presenters, so we don't go too much over time. But if you go over it really fast, and then like about a minute left.
Yeah, sounds good. So we dropped that video yesterday. Monday. Yesterday, we dropped a video on history of the census, so kind of just outlining how the census has looked throughout the last couple of years. We have a digital pledge card on our website that you can even go look at if you go to joltinitiative.org. And that's basically a pledge card that the community can fill out to make sure that they're getting counted. And after that, once they sign up, we send them information and through text campaigns about the census. We're doing call to action. So the way we're going to be using our like volunteers moving forward is we're going to be putting out call to actions and asking them to be like census ambassadors, where they will learn and train how to phone bank and help us with our phone banking numbers, as well as we're having a Twitter party. This is the last thing I'll mention. We're having a Twitter party this Friday, and if you don't know what a Twitter party is, it's basically you go on Twitter and you tweet things with certain questions and sentences and use a common hashtag. So if you guys would like to join us, we're having a Twitter party this Friday at 2 p.m. We're just we're dropping a list of questions and information about the census by the end of the day, and we're just asking you to tweet those things with our hashtag Contamos. So just kind of try to trend on digital platforms. We're talking about creating challenges. So the next slide we'll talk about
and thank you, Leslie. We're just over time right now, and we still have a lot of other presenters, but I will ask for this video, if you can put the link of it on our chat box, on the chat section, and folks can probably open it up in their own screen and they can see it. But thank you so much. So I know this is like a limited time for everybody to really talk about everything that's going on, but for folks who get inspired by what's being shared, please feel free to reach out to Leslie and Maria, and they'll be able to connect. I want to move us on to our phone banking, who Erica is on the call. To jump in from movetexas.org. Thank you again, Leslie and Maria.
Greetings, everyone. I'm Erica from Move Texas. I am the organizing manager, so I oversee the field department. And obviously, we're having to change a lot of things because field is an in-person department. So next slide. I'm going to talk about phone banking. I know a lot of you have different like levels of technology and levels of access to like funding and things like that. So this is going to be like the most top line, like easiest way. Anyone can do it. You don't have to buy any programs. Like this is how you can phone bank with just Google spreadsheets. And this is very much like, I tried to make it as instructional as possible because I want y'all to come away with this like feeling comfortable making one. I'm gonna go ahead and drop an example one I made. It's pretty skimpy, but just like so you can get the gist of the layout of your phone banking list and what it should look like or what it can look like. So first things first, obviously I didn't put this as a bullet, but you want to make your script. It's really important that your script is conversational and natural, and that you, when you're training your volunteers or your team or whoever it may be on your script, you want to make sure that they have wiggle room to ask, like, you know, especially during COVID-19, to open up with like, how are people doing, and making it not as robotic and giving them leeway to be human, especially if they're peer-to-peer organizing, like making space in the script to connect on that, whatever that may look like. But then once you get your script, and make sure everyone has access to your script, very important, you want to upload your phone banking list into a spreadsheet. So whether you're taking that list from Van, the voter file, or you have your own list, if you have a paper list, you're going to want to upload it into a spreadsheet manually. But upload your phone list into a spreadsheet. You're going to want to have columns for the first name, last name, and this is really important just in case if like right now you start out and you're just using Google Sheets. Like we started as a student organization at Move Texas, so we used to, you know, not have the funding to use things like Hub Dialer, which I'll get into. But if you want to make sure that your spreadsheet is set up to where once you want to move over to any of those things, that it'll make it as easy as possible to transition to that platform. So separating by first and last name is really important if you want to match these people to the voter file later or anything like that. And then include columns for the name of person making the calls. This is really important, especially if you have paid canvassers or anything like that, for accountability, because you want to make sure like you know who's reaching out to who, or, you know, God forbid if anything went wrong, you would know like who reached out to that person. And also you want to give people credit where it's due. Like if they're making 100 calls in an hour, like kudos to them, and you want to celebrate your team members. In the phone numbers, when you upload your phone numbers, I really recommend you don't put any dashes or parentheses. And that's going to make it really easier. So if you ever upload your phone list, like there's no errors. A lot of things like through text and things like that, like don't like it when you have dashes and parentheses. And then also, for the column where people are actually responding to the call, obviously the main thing that you want to get out of these calls is knowing what the person said. So for instance, for the census, I put in my example spreadsheet that like your responses could be like already filled out the census.
Could you speak a little slowly, please?
Oh yes, sorry.
Sorry,
Bad habit.
because some of us don't speak too much English. Then
Yeah, no
good.
worries. Thank you for the reminder. I know I have a little bit of time, but I'll definitely slow down. So for your column where you put the actual responses to what the people said on the phone call, or whether you left a voicemail so that you can remember to call them back, or anything like that, I always recommend that you make it a multiple choice rather than just letting your callers put whatever they'd like, so that there's consistency, and that if you do want to do another run through of your phone banking list, you can call those people back and like sort it by like, you know, Z to A, and then at the top it will be all the people you left a voicemail for, all the people who were busy or didn't answer, so that it just makes it easier on you on the back end. So really recommend that you don't leave the response column open for anyone to type. And if you have any questions about how to make it a scroll box or anything like that, I only know how to use Google Suites because I Google these things, but I'm happy to connect with anyone if y'all have questions about that. Color coding in your spreadsheet is also really helpful. I like to, when we make our manual phone banking lists, color code what day these people were called. You can also have a column for like last date contacted. And if you want to have multiple of those, like, so that you know you called this person last week and you called this person 2 days ago, so that you don't try them again if you left a voicemail already. Or you can color code, like if you don't want to make a column for names, if you have volunteers and you want to just like assign volunteers a color and then canvassers a color, whatever it may be. And then in order to use third-party tools, like if you have access to Hub Dialer or Every Action, which is a part of Van, then you're going to want to convert your slide with all your phone numbers to a CSV, which is basically like a Word document to upload it. And Hub Dialer is one that I really recommend if you do have access to a third-party auto dialer system. The great thing about Hub Dialer is that it'll keep track of every person who logged in. It'll tell you how many calls you made. It'll tell you how many calls that person made. It'll tell you how long that person's calls were. It'll tell you what time they logged out, so that you can really keep track of like how much time have we spent phone banking, what should our goals be, what should we expect from our volunteers as far as like calls per hour and things like that. And you can like upload your script within Hub Dialer. People don't need an account with Hub Dialer. Like you don't need to make an account. All they need is the campaign code and the password, which you create. And then Every Action, if you have access to Van, Van doesn't give you as much specific breakdown as far as like who made how many calls and things like that, but it will let you keep track of like, this is how many calls you made this day, and this is the responses, and it'll give you little visuals like pie charts on like, this is how many people responded this way versus the other way. And if you're ever worried about using your phone number and you don't want like people to call you back, or if your volunteers are worried about people like calling them back about anything in the process of phone banking, Google Voice will produce like a fake phone number basically that you can still access the voicemails for. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Oh, wait, just kidding. Census Week. So for Census Week, we're doing a lot of social media amplification, doing our phone banks via video. Now, during COVID-19, people are not getting that face-to-face interaction. So having the video chat open while everyone phone banks is really helpful. And we're going to do live Q&As on Facebook and Instagram to answer people's questions about the census, sending mass emails about the census, text banking, which we use through text for, obviously phone banking. And relational organizing apps. I'm not sure if someone on the call is going to touch on those, but those are really helpful to like have 10 friends, text 10 other friends and ask if they filled out the census. And if not, like, do they need help? And yeah, I don't want to take up any more time. Sorry if I talk too fast.
You're
but
good. Yeah, thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.
And for those who don't know what she's holding on to, that's an old phone. We used to use those. Anyways, thank you so much for that. We're going to give the next presenter 7 minutes. Thank you, Erica. Remember to use the chat box if you heard anything from Erica from Texas Freedom, from Texas Civil Rights Project and from Jolt that you want to connect. Use the chat box to talk to them and see how you can work on something together. Next up, we have from Texas Freedom Network, we have Lisa.
Hello, everyone. How are you? I hope everyone is doing well. My name is Lisa Sargent. I'm with Texas Rising. I am a Census and Civic Engagement Coordinator. So we'll be talking about text banking today. We primarily use Hustle, but I do know that there are other systems out there like Relay, which is peer-to-peer, which I'll describe what that means. And then there's also Strive, which is mass texting. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So steps to create a text bank. First of all, you want to get your list, but even before that, really, so we use Hustle, and Hustle is 5 cents per text. And Hustle is a peer-to-peer text platform. So when we say peer-to-peer, what we mean is it's more personalized. You can send individual responses to folks that you're texting who respond back to your initial message and to have a conversation with them, as opposed to mass texting platforms that send messages to folks who have opted in and have allowed you to contact them. And essentially with mass texting, it sends out one mass text to from a 7-digit number to a whole group of folks. So the first step in creating a text bank, you want to get your list. So most orgs, you've already have your list of contacts that you've obtained from pledges and other methods, or you can create a list from scratch. That also works as well. The second step is to upload your list. And so with Hustle specifically, you can either upload by bulk with a CSV file, excuse me, or you can add folks individually. It takes more time, but if for some reason you want to use that method, you can as well. Step 3 is adding agents. So an agent is someone are the folks who will be participating in the text bank. So that can be your staffers, that can be your membership base, that can be your volunteers, that can be yourself. Just anyone who is going to be participating in the text bank, you want to make sure those folks are called agents in Hustle specifically. Step 4 is to create your script. So here, you really want to take a lot of time and attention to really creating your strategy and really making sure that your voice is authentic to your membership base. So for Texas Rising, we do work with folks who are mostly under 30 and they're students in particular. And so we want to make sure that that conversation that we're having through text is relatable to them, and make sure that when you're creating your script that it is short. You want to make sure that it's short and to the point, but it is conveying as much information as possible to your audience. So when you're creating the script, things to think about is like, what info do you want to get out to your people? What are you asking? What are your asks when you are creating these scripts? And how many asks are you looking from folks? Are you looking for folks to sign a pledge? Are you looking to share a petition? Are you just trying to let folks know about updates? Like, what exactly are you trying to convey with this script? So for Hustle, they also allow you to create response scripts. And those are essentially, if you know what you're gonna be reaching out to folks on, you really want to make sure that you're thinking through possible responses that folks will send you. So in particular, when we talk about Census, you'll probably get a lot of folks. If you know that a lot of folks don't know about Census already, you might want to create a response script of what is the Census? Why is it important, especially to your target population? And you want to reiterate that you're not the Census Bureau, so that can be one response script. You also want to, well, what we're doing is connecting current events to the significance of completing the census. So highlighting the need for COVID response and like health services, right? And so how those things are funded by the census. So really making sure that you're connecting the things that are affecting your population to why they should be filling out the census in particular. So the next step is to launch your text bank. Oh, you go back for a second.
Sorry.
You're fine. Is to launch your text bank. So you can invite all your agents to this. So once you add your agents into Hustle, they'll receive a text from you, or from Hustle rather, and they'll go to that link and it'll take them directly to the text bank that you created for them. But also don't forget to remind them to download the Hustle app beforehand if they haven't already. And then the last step is that you want to train your folks. So you want to go over all the Hustle functions for folks who are first-time users or first-time text bankers. And even just as a refresher for folks who've already used Hustle, you want to go over the script, get them familiar with it, have them read over it, and maybe read it with other text bankers that are in the room with them. You want to go over any responses or open the floor up for responses that maybe they want to add, so you can add it later, or the folks that will be leading that text bank. And you want to also go over any best practices. You can go to the next slide, please. So for text bank best practices, you want to think about creating compliance and sign-in sheets. So the sign-in sheets are to keep a roster of the folks that are in your text bank that are coming either regularly or just to see how many folks are actually participating in these events that you're having. And if you are a nonprofit, nonpartisan nonprofit like we are, and you're doing, let's say, voter informational text banks, you want to make sure that your text bankers aren't responding in a partisan way when they're having these conversations with folks. Another best practice is to create a system to address harassment, because the fact of the matter is there are people that are going to send you text messages and you might get some pictures, you might get some inappropriate comments, and you want to make sure and you want to reassure your text bankers that they do not have to respond or answer to any of those. So just make sure that you're creating a system that addresses that harassment. There are opt-out options on Hustle, and that includes, again, inappropriate behavior, if the person is moved out of state, if you only want folks who are Texas specific, it includes people who are deceased, if it's a wrong number, or if they just asked you to opt them out. And then another best practice is to be available for your text bankers. So if you are not, whether or not you're specifically hosting the text bank, let's say you have a volunteer lead, you train someone to host this text bank, you want to make sure that they're available for text bankers in case any issues come up in real time, so that they can just be comfortable and knowing that there is additional support for them. If you can go to the next slide, please. So for Census Week, we have a statewide training with a lot of our students in different regions, just giving them, we did a training in January with them, but we want to make sure that they're up to date about census updates, since a lot of students in particular were forced out of their dorms and are confused about whether or not they need to be kind of at home or at their dorms or by themselves. So we're going to check in to let them know the logistics on that. We want to also make sure that we're talking about what it looks like to fill out the census and how to help others and their families fill out the census. And then we're also going to have a brainstorming session in that training of how to make this region, how to make this culturally relevant by region in Texas based on the issues that are happening statewide. So we're also going to have an Instagram census challenge. So it's just a collection of content from young folks who filled out the census, or just anything that they really, really want to highlight. We're going to have a hashtag as well. We do want to make it a challenge. So we're probably going to have it a challenge by region. So Houston region, El Paso, things like that. And then we're going to just be doing the traditional text banking and phone banking for next week. And then we're going to have a launch, a census page launch sometime later this week as well. That's all I have. If anyone has any questions, feel free to say it at the end. And we'll be sending a template of the census script for folks who just kind of want to see what that looks like.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Zanen from TCRP.
Hi, everyone. This is Zanen. Oscar said with the Texas Civil Rights Project. There's my contact info. If you want to contact me after this, I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about some of the internal tools that folks can use in the next coming weeks and months, and however long we're going to be in this socially distanced space. So I'm going to talk first about webinars and then conference calls and talk through some tools and best practices on that. So we go to the next slide. So the first thing, and I think this is the one that is most salient to folks that have basically did their whole campaign plans and then all of a sudden have to switch over to online events instead of in-person events. And I know a lot of folks are now thinking about how to do webinars. So I wanted to go through some of the tools here and make sure that we talk about some of the best practices. And for folks who haven't been on a webinar, well, you are now. This is your first one. But webinars are great alternatives to these in-person meetings because they do allow you to be a bit more expansive in your reach and also kind of more tailor the experience that you want to set and provide more engaging content. And before I move forward, I want to make sure I reiterate Oscar's point from the beginning that if you're an HiA member, they can set you up with Zoom, which is the platform that we're using now. They do have different plans and pricing, and you can get the one that's tailored to your needs. Highly, highly recommend it. You know, as we're all planning, make sure that you use this time to really know and understand these tools and upgrade the tools you're using, and it's going to give you a lot of returns moving forward, in addition to hustle and all of the other stuff that my co-presenters talked about. So please download it and use it. Go to the next slide. So in terms of how to make a successful webinar, one of the things that you should always keep in mind is that making a webinar is 90% planning and 10% execution, right? A lot of the times when we don't put in this planning work on the back end, we see sort of the technical problems come up during the webinar. There's things that you might have been able to troubleshoot that you didn't. And so really wanted to point out that, you know, this is the back end of what Zoom looks like. And it's very important that you go line by line on each of these. Make sure that everything is filled out, that there's no language there that you don't want to see. And then also that you're setting it for the right time zones, whether you're going to require passwords, Or even if you're going to allow people to use video, right? Like right now, there's not several people doing video, but if you're setting up your webinar, you can turn that off. So these are all things that you should be planning and making sure that you're talking about with your team as you're moving forward and putting all of this in a doc. One big way I recommend to actually plan is to do what we did for this webinar, but we do have like a master webinar template, like a TikTok, right? It literally talks about what's going to happen at each time, who's responsible for what are your goals, how you're going to promote it. All of those things are very helpful and necessary to have at the back end to make sure that you're successful. And the other sort of the planning is the most important piece, but the other important piece is to know your audience. And each of y'all are going to have your own audience, and I'll talk a little bit about how we do it at TCRP. I wanted to present a little bit of information that data that comes from GoToWebinar that talks about like when do most people attend webinars. And just to caveat, like this is people like us, you know, who can join a webinar in the middle of the day and might have a job at an office that we can do this. This might look different for your members who might prefer a nighttime webinar. So you should feel free to ask, right? Send out a survey, ask people, when would you be most likely to use a webinar or to attend a webinar, and then build your information around that. But just so y'all see, the overall trend is that Wednesdays and Thursdays are the best times for people to join a webinar, especially in midday like we're doing here. So definitely look at this data, look at trends, but also survey your members. Can we go to the next slide? The next thing, like I said, set your preferences ahead of time. And one important point I do want to make is on the next slide. Is that one of the things that you should be really thinking about and balancing here is what is the purpose of your webinar? Do you want to make sure that you're broadcasting out information out to as many people, or do you want to make sure that only certain people get the information? So as you're setting up the webinar, you're going to have an option to be able to do broadcast or Zoom registration. And there's trade-offs and benefits to each, right? So if you're requiring registration and you use Zoom, you're gonna the audience who's going to look at the webinar are going to need to either download the Zoom app on their phone or on their desktop, and that of course can limit what some people can do. So you should ask your members or ask your community what they would prefer, and then also just make sure that you talk about this ahead of time. The other option here is what actually HiA is doing right now through live streaming. Right, like yes, you were able to register for this webinar, you got the link, all of that, and we were able to record that information that HiA is going to follow up with you with resources. But if you decide that, hey, you know what, that's not as important to us as making sure that this information gets out there, Zoom has really excellent tools to be able to basically, as you're having this presentation, be able to broadcast it on your Facebook Live or YouTube Live. And the benefit of that, right, is that you can literally just tell people to go to this YouTube link and watch the video, right? Like you don't have to be able to get people to register. You don't have to ask them to download Zoom. If you go this route though, just make sure you know that there's going to be some data and information that you're not going to be able to capture. So you should weigh that and balance that. And then also if you go this route, make sure that you know and understand the technical back end of this, right? Because as an example, we had our webinar on last week for TCRP, and we didn't prepare as much as we should have. And we literally ran up to the wire like 2 minutes before we started trying to set up the broadcast, and we were able to do it. But like, that's stressful, makes your hair fall out. So make sure that you get that done ahead of time. Next slide. And so any last tips, just here's some 12. I'll just read them out loud pretty quickly, but also you should take into a look at these later. Use as many visuals as you can, like this beautiful webinar. It really makes the difference between like someone seeing a boring webinar that they're not going to pay attention to. Make sure that you're highlighting, like we did here, what is important that people see, and avoid any slides that you're just going to show a few seconds. If you're not going to talk about it, that means it shouldn't be there. So be very judicious about what you're going to be putting on there. And if you're not going to be on video, make sure that you put a photo of yourself or the presenters on the webinar. It's really important that people see who's talking at them, especially now that we're all going to be apart for so long. Make sure that you have a place where people can ask questions, and be sure to use headphones if you're not going to be in a quiet area. Turn off your notifications on your phones. Make sure your dogs are away. My dog's in my room right now, so he can't bark. And rehearse, right? Like, you need to practice. We practice this beforehand, and it's very important that you have a space to be able to like troubleshoot. So if you're scheduling a webinar, you should also be scheduling a time to rehearse. And then also let people know when you're going to be silent, so folks don't freak out and think about what's happening. And like Joy is doing here, have a spotter. Make sure that there's someone there who can follow the comments and make sure that points that are being raised make it to the discussion. And plan. Next slide. And then the last thing to cover is video calls and conference calls. Again, wanted to make sure that folks knew that this is going to be the bread and butter for a lot of us. And I'm sure this is probably y'all's 13th conference call or webinar of the day. And that's just only going to continue. So again, wanted to reiterate that there's several different options. I know several folks, like in previous organizations, we used freeconferencecall.com. That is a great option, but since HiA is here and you can request resources, now's the time to upgrade, right? Like, start thinking about using Google Hangout, using Zoom. These things have a lot more functions that allow you to make this, however you make the call, run the way you want it to, and make sure that data is being captured. So I'm going to go over two big Google Hangouts and Zoom to make sure that y'all adopt those. And then also at the end, there's a slide of different options that you can use if you need them. So first, on Google Hangouts, the important thing to always know is that it's a free software if you have the Google Suite, and it very much integrates with your Google Calendar. So it's important that as you're making meetings and making sure that people have this information, that if you're making a calendar invite, you can add directly the Google Hangouts there under Add Conferencing. This will automatically make it a video call, a phone call, or both if you need it. And it's a very simple tool to be able to use, and highly encourage you to do so. There's also integrations for Outlook and other web service clients and calendars if you use those, and highly encourage you to download those now and make sure that you know how to use them. Next slide. The other thing here is Zoom, right? So this is what the backend looks like, and you'll see there some of the meetings that we have internally at TCRP. Make sure you are setting those ahead of time, right? Like, plan out your calendar, make sure that they're set up, and make sure that the information is on your Google Calendars, iCalendar, Outlook Calendar, all of that. And if you want to schedule a new meeting, log into your Zoom and hit the schedule a new meeting button, and make sure that you set all of the settings the way you want them to be set. If you don't do this, right, like, it's very possible that someone can like log into your Zoom, and all of a sudden all of the people in that call are kicked out, and then you have to scramble to figure it out. So make sure you're planning ahead of time. Next slide. And then finally, the last suggestion is I encourage y'all to use Zoom is if you have Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge for whatever reason, download the extension for Zoom. You can literally Google Zoom Scheduler for any of your browser, and it adds an integration so that literally there's a little button you can click that says schedule a meeting, and then also it integrates with all of your calendar options so that you can literally hit a button that says make it a Zoom meeting, and that way it'll automatically make all of the information that you need, and it makes it so much more simple to be able to do these things on the fly and have it set up. Next slide. And then finally, like I said, a lot of planning. Make sure that you're planning so that you can fix any technical difficulties. Be upfront about call disruptions, when you're going to be late. We're going to all have to switch our etiquette now that we're going to be doing a lot more phone calls. And it's really important that you don't be that person, right? That like you're not making sure that you're inhibiting a call because you're a little bit late. Make sure that you know who's there. You know, we at TCRP take security very seriously. We want to make sure that like maybe some of our opposition isn't sneaking into our calls. So we make sure to always do a lot of check-ins and attendance check-ins and write down who's there, and supplement with video whenever you can. Speak loudly and clearly. Establish what was accomplished when you're done, especially for conference calls and video calls like this. it's really hard to focus, right? And sometimes people jump in, jump out, get a coffee, tend to their dog. So at the end, make space to talk about like what's happening next, what it was accomplished, and follow up with notes to make sure that people who missed it can still get the information. That's it. Just last takeaway, use Plan, get Zoom, take advantage of HiA's resources and get Zoom, and know and understand the technology before you do it. And this is going to make your census or whatever type of outreach and events work run a lot more smoothly as we face a couple more weeks of this.
Thank you so much, Zenan. Thank you so much for all your work and all the efforts. This is really, really helpful. Remember to reach out to the chat box if you want to talk to Zenan about this and how we can follow up with. Our next person, we'll go over direct mail campaigns. I want to make sure Maria is on the call from Interfaith Ministries. Is she on?
Maria, you might be on mute if you're speaking.
Yes, you might be muted, Maria. I'm not sure if you're speaking. Thank you.
It's star.
Yes, so Maria called in. If you can hear us, press *6 to unmute yourself on the phone, and you'll be able to jump in. If not, we could jump to our last presenter from United We Dream. And Maria, if you can text Joy or Mario to make sure when you're back on, and we'll make sure we'll add you in. Okay, our next person is Adrian Reina, an old friend of mine from United We Dream. If you want to take it away, Adrian.
Hey.
Hello, this is Maria.
Oh,
Oh my.
there we go. Okay, Adrian, just hold on a minute. So we'll go back to Interfaith Ministry. So Maria, can you hear us?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. So if you want to get started, we can go over the process in the direct mailing campaign.
Okay, thank you. I want to apologize for the weak connection. My Wi-Fi keeps going in and out, so I got kicked out of Zoom. But I've been asked to present on direct mail. I am not an expert on the census, but I'm an expert on fundraising. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston. And we have a robust direct mail program that brings in over $800,000 a year. Direct mail can be used for fundraising, but also for marketing and promotion, such as promoting the census. So I just wanted to go over a few facts about direct mail, and then I'm happy to answer any questions before I leave the call. So direct mail is a very traditional way of marketing. It's very old-fashioned, but it can still be effective, especially in times like this when we're not able to meet with our donors and constituents face-to-face, and the post office is still running. We can use direct mail. So there are two main ways to use direct mail marketing. The first is to reach out to your current constituents. This is called renewal. So you would simply mail to your existing mailing list. This can be done in-house. It's very simple to do and very cost-effective. You can also use direct mail for acquisition. As a fundraiser, I use this to acquire new donors. We actually rent lists of prospective donors, and we send out direct mail appeals to them. This is a much more complicated process. It really cannot be done in-house. You have to work with a direct mail company to do this. Acquisition is very costly. It is quite expensive to rent the list, and you usually don't make any money on it. You actually lose money, but the whole idea is to acquire new donors that you might otherwise not have exposure to. And then once you acquire them, you're able to cultivate them and hopefully move them to higher level gifts. In direct mail, most nonprofits mail at bulk nonprofit rate. It's certainly the most cost-effective way to do it. A typical sized letter would only cost 13.5 cents to mail. You can do bulk mail in-house. It's pretty complicated. The letters have to be sorted in a specific way by zip code, and they have to be brought to the post office bulk mail department. It's extremely labor-intensive and complicated, so if you're able to afford to outsource this, I would highly recommend doing so. As y'all all know, first-class mail is 50 cents a piece, which is more expensive, but the mail will get to your constituents faster. Bulk rate usually takes at least a week to 10 business days to reach your constituents. Ever since we had post office delays over the last few months, so mail is running even slower than normal. So if you can afford first class postage, I would recommend that. What are the typical rates of return for direct mail? So when you're mailing to your existing constituents, you can expect to see anywhere from a 5 to a 35% rate of return, just depending on how engaged your constituents are. When you're renting acquisition list to acquire new donors or constituents, the rate of response is actually very low. 1 to 2% is considered a good rate of return. Acquisition direct marketing is better viewed as an investment. You're investing to acquire new constituents and then cultivate them. And then who does direct mail appeal to? Obviously, it appeals more to the older generation. Those studies have shown that even millennials will respond to direct mail. They will read the packages, but then if they choose to engage with your organization, they'll typically go online to do so. Even in studies showing how baby boomers react to boomers, about a quarter of boomers will read the direct mail piece and go online to make their gift or to get engaged. So it's important when you're running a direct mail campaign to have that same information on your website, to promote it through your social media channels, and possibly to have an email appeal going out at the same time. I will share from Interfaith Ministries experience. We did an email appeal very early on when the COVID outbreak started. We started our appeal on March 11th, and the appeal not only brought in a lot of online gifts, but it inspired a lot of major gifts. And from that one appeal, we've raised close to $500,000 in 10 days. So it can be very effective for your constituents. I know that was a lot of information, and I'm a fundraiser. I'm not really knowledgeable about the census, but I'm happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
Thank you so much, Mariana. I think that was really, really helpful. I think we can also, as y'all think about questions, this is a tactic that a lot of the folks might not be familiar with. So we do have one other presenter coming up before we open up to the Q&A. So if you don't mind staying a little longer, Maria, we're jumping into the questions. For folks who are asking questions using the chat, make sure to write them in there. So at the end, Joy and the rest of the team can present it. So.
Okay, that's fine. I do have to leave at 12:30 for another meeting, so I can stay on until then.
Thank you so much, Maria. And we'll jump into our next presenter, Adrian. Again, take it away.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you, everyone. Really excited to be here with all of you. I am Adrian, Strategy Director at United We Dream. Just really excited to get a chance to share some best practices. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to give a full crash course on digital ads, but want to definitely share some key top lines that I hope will, if you think about running a digital ad program, we're here to help out, or we can point you to some resources, right, that are available to do some of this work. So just really quickly, the definition of a digital ad. This means any content that you put money behind it so that it appears in front of people's screens, whether it's on their computers at home or on their cell phones, depending what platform they're using. Nowadays, you can pay basically to promote as much content as you want in almost any platform. It doesn't have to be social media. You can pay for ads on things like Google. You can pay for ads for things on third-party platforms. If you've ever used like the Weather Channel app, for example, or some apps that allow you to have a little banner on it in terms of like an ad. But what I'm gonna focus on today, because it's very particular to a lot of our work, is social media. I'll start by saying this, social media platforms are always and have forever been focused on making money. And the way that they make money is by by advertising revenue. That is their largest way that they make money. So social media platforms actually set up their systems on social media as to be able to incentivize organizations, companies, you name it, to have to put money behind something that really has to catch a lot of people's attention. Right now, it has been recorded that you will hear someone say like organic content. Organic content refers to anything that you post on your social media and then you're just hoping it'll go viral, right? It's just that it's out there in the universe, it's being shared by people, no money behind it. That's what it means for something to be an organic share or an organic post. It is no longer organic if you put a little bit of money into it, for lack of better terms. Organic reach on social media is at an all-time low, meaning that we can post as much as we want left and right, but it's gonna cap, and not because your content is not good or not because your content is not being reached by your audiences who follow you, but because if you really want to have that like viral effect, or you really want to have that reach effect, relying on people sharing content is not the way to do that. And so that is why we suggest oftentimes for folks to also think about a digital ads budget that you can have. Now, some of the things I will say in terms of how ads work, there's 3 types of ads in social media. I see a lot of times folk get this idea that like you made a graphic, you just want to make it into an ad, then that's an ad. Just putting money behind it doesn't make it an effective ad. It can make it an ad, but it doesn't make it effective. So your ads have to be very focused and very specific. There's 3 ways to categorize ads. One is on awareness. Second is on what we call consideration. So folks going through a website, downloading an application, watching a video, so people's attention. And then conversion, meaning you're putting money into an ad to get people to give you, whether it's an email or a cell phone or some point of information that you're trying to get people to give you. Now, the reason why it's important to categorize ads is to help us decide which strategy we're going to drive. If your goals are to simply reach as many people as you can with a message, right, then that has to be your goal. And you design content and promote content via digital ads that's very specific to brand content, to increase brand awareness or anything like that. Second is consideration, so running ad programs that are actually that are focused on driving views, for example, and that is a different type of setup that you have to do. And conversions, which are the more tricky ones, is kind of a mix of the initial 2 of awareness and consideration to actually try to persuade people to click on a site and actually give you information. Now, in terms of how this works, every social media platform is different. One of the things I've noticed, that isn't often a mistake that is often made when running digital programs, is that folks will take something that you prepared for Facebook and just post that on Twitter and post that on Instagram and post that on YouTube or wherever else you're going to post it. And the truth is that each platform has very different user experiences. And so that is why if you're going to be running an ad program, you have to be very specific about what kind of ad program you're running. There is search engine ad digital programs, which happens through Google. Obviously, Facebook is one of the biggest platforms where people run digital ad buys, Instagram, Twitter, and all of these apps have, like, all of these applications and all of these systems have very sophisticated, like, digital ad buy programs that you have access to. The particular piece to be aware of here, especially if you're working with like folks in your team are undocumented, or folks in your team aren't US citizens, there is a lot of restrictions that go into place now after 2016 about which content is promoted and isn't. Now, I know that it gets messy because the platforms, meaning Facebook, Google, Twitter, ultimately have the power to decide what is appropriate content for distribution. But the thing is that nationally, there has been a table of folks who has been working with the platforms to make sure that they are ensuring that census content, accurate information about the census, is what they're actually approving in terms of what to prioritize in terms of census content. And so that shouldn't be a problem, but oftentimes Facebook moderators of digital ad buys will, for a lack of a better term, censor what ad buys they allow. And so if you run into that problem, I think you can reach out to the Houston in Action team, right? And we can work together to sort of rectify that, but we have had that issue come along. Oscar, I know I only had like 7 minutes, so that's why I felt like going into the specifics of like going through setting up a digital ad would just take too long. But if folks are interested in that, totally happy to have a one-on-one powwow for folks to train someone in your team or to help them sort of get their bearings together to run an ad program.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Yes, and that's the hope. So for folks who have questions, who you want to connect with, make sure you collect these emails, and we'll send a follow-up so y'all know who to talk to about the specific topics that were covered today. We wanted to jump into a Q&A portion. We know there's some questions that are already shared in the chat portion, but as we go through the Q&A, if you don't have a question and still want to listen and hear what we're saying, please follow this bit.ly. Joy is going to add it in our chat portion right now. This bit.ly is going to take you to help us give us a feedback survey about how the training was. It only takes a couple of minutes. It's going to really help not just us in Houston Action, but all our membership and the folks who presented today. To see how helpful this was. It only takes a few minutes, like 5 questions, and in the last question that you will see, once you follow that link, it will ask if this wasn't up to the expectation, what would you like to see change. I also advise you to add in there if you had like any ideas of other stuff that you wanted us to cover. So anything else that in the future you might need connection with the resources, we want to be able to do that. So either type down this bit.ly or get it the bit.ly from our chat box, and we'll be able to get your responses. So we had over 80 some plus people at this call, which we were very excited to hear all of you and be able to share this. But I also wanted to follow through some of the questions. And I think one of the first questions that I remember we had was from Francisco. It says, does anyone have an open VPB? I believe VPB is a virtual phone bank, or open auto dollar campaign available for phone bank remotely. So I'm not sure if one of the presenters wanted to take it on, or if that's something we can share from our end. Chris, are you on the call? So I know that for a lot of our membership through virtual phone banking, we've been using Every Action as a platform, and we're trying to see what the best process is to make it available for our partners. Francisco, I hope this answers your question. So as we get through the process, one of my goals is to have a virtual phone bank training of using the process through Every Action. Through our trial and error and practicing and taking a look at what's out there, we actually came to the conclusion that the virtual phone banking process through Every Action is one of the best systems there is. When it comes to a lot of data systems, unfortunately, there isn't like the data system. Everything is complicated sometimes. Everything has its own intricacies. So it might not be that there's one system that fits everybody, but with, like Zanen mentioned, with a lot of practice and a lot of follow through, the things will get easier and easier. So be on the lookout for that training within the next week or so, where we're going to go through the step-by-step process on how to do them. So we have y'all's back, especially if you don't have access to that. We're working on the process to give it access to people who don't currently have access.
Hey, Oscar, this is Chris.
Yes.
I was just going to say, Francisco, we're going to follow up with you directly. We got your response from the survey from the last call too. We want to make sure that we can offer you whatever support we're able to when it comes to phone banking. And I saw that Tana Pradia also mentioned that. Donna, if you can just send an email to chris@houstoninaction.org. We'll make sure that we pull all these conversations together to understand how we best support people with phone banking.
Thank you, Chris. That is very, very helpful. We have a question specifically for Adrian. I know he stepped out for a bit. I'm not sure if he can hear us, but if you can, thank you. Sorry for making you run back to the computer, Adrian. But one of the questions we had is, what is the typical ad buy budget? $20, $200? There's a question from Maria. Sorry, that was for you, Adrian.
Yeah, so it depends. So the way that Facebook, and it depends by platform. I will stick to Facebook because usually that's the one that most people have want to publish there. Depending on the type of program you want to drive, if you're wanting to drive like an awareness campaign where you just want to reach as many people as you can, you don't have to spend a lot of money if it's in a specific geography, like $1,000, $2,000, and also over the period of time. If you want to spend the $2,000 over one day, that might not be the most strategic use of money. But if you want to spend $2,000 over 15 days, for example, to reach about 1 million, 2 million people, depending on geography, right? Because you can put $2,000 and expect 2 million people, but if there's not even 2 million people that live in that geography, it'll be very difficult to reach that number. You kind of have to have a large enough universe. I usually like to tell people, if you want to reach 2 million people, you usually have to reach about 5 times that number. You have to target about 5 times that number. So about a universe of 10 million people, $2,000 over 15 days will get you those views. If you're trying to run an acquisition campaign, like remember the third type I talked about, those are a lot more expensive, and also depends on the market. Because if there's other corporations or folks who have a lot more money than we do, they're trying to put money. Remember, they're also trying to sell products, and their end goal is to try to get someone to actually buy something. Then that's where you really need a really large budget. I would say if you're like in the Houston area, we have seen it fluctuate, like an acquisition rate of like people giving you emails, cell phones, of about $25 a lead over a period of 3 months. And so depending on your goal, if you're trying to do a base building campaign or like get hard to count people to give you their cell phone so you can reach out to them directly via an ad buy program, I would budget somewhere between the $15 and the $25 range for those cell phones in the greater Houston metropolitan area.
I would just add to what Adriana is sharing, is that for the census for the Houston Harris County region, we are creating a coordinated campaign of which United We Dream is a partner, as well as other groups who are looking to do paid advertising in the region. The reason that we're doing that is so that people are not duplicating efforts, and where we have people driving up the cost of ads or being in the same geographic regions or targeting the same folks unnecessarily or in the most strategic way possible. So if you're interested in joining that conversation, please send me an email. My email's in the chat, chris@houstoninaction.org. And we can join you into that conversation as well.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, so please follow up because we want to be able to provide this. Then we have 2 questions from Maria from Interfaith Ministries. If you're still on the call, I'm not sure if you can mute yourself before we ask them. I know you had limited a time with us, and I want to make sure that we get this. Either way, we are tracking them. If Maria is not on the call, for the folks who did have questions about direct mail, the question was, I would love to more information about direct mail and the average cost for the list. You can contact her for best practices. Maria, we'll make sure that you get the information for her information so you can follow up. And as well as we'll ask her and we'll send it out to everybody. Okay, the next question that we have is for Lisa. You're still here. Awesome. Lisa, can you quickly go over how, can you quickly go over how you track text engagement again? How do you follow up?
How I track what now?
Text messaging engagement again.
Okay, so so specifically for Hustle, there is a section on the back end that allows you to look at text bankers' performance. So it lists their name, it lists how many texts they've done. So if you do have a text goal, let's say 3 to 350 text messages an hour, it'll let you track how often folks are completing that goal. And then it also shows how many folks have responded yes to whatever your ask is, or how many folks have responded no to whatever your ask is. And it gives you that percentage just to see like kind of how things are going. So it also, the contacts that you put in to Hustle are called universes. And so a warm universe is one where for folks who you've already come in contact with, folks who kind of know your organization already, as opposed to a cold universe, people you've never contacted before. So you do want to keep in mind numbers, the percentage of like yes responses to no responses might change depending on like how, I'll say friendly your universe is. So you might have to do a little bit more work when you're talking to folks who are on the cold list. But also keep in mind, because those text messages are 5 cents per text, that you don't want to like run up the bill too much when you're having back and forth conversations with people. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you, Lisa. We have another question, a general question for everybody. All the presenters is that my audience uses WhatsApp for more than anything else. Have any ever used this for relationship organizing? From my end, what I can share for people, other folks want to join in, I have used this. It's a really cool tool. What I like about the WhatsApp specifically is that the immigrant communities are very active on WhatsApp. It also allows people to make international calls, so it means that people can reach outside of the spaces. So you could have a much larger group. It is owned by Facebook, but on the other hand, a lot of the information there is also encrypted, so that information also doesn't get out, so it's fairly safe to use. At the moment, the information in WhatsApp, they have to be in your platform, in your phone before you can add them into your WhatsApp. The tracking of it is, it's different depending on how you work through the WhatsApp program. But if y'all wanted like a training specifically on how to use WhatsApp, that's one thing. If you want a training on how to build relationships through texting and these different texting tools, essentially you could use WhatsApp. It's very similar how you use any texting base. It's keeping those relationships, reminding people and reaching out to them so you can connect with them. The really good thing about WhatsApp too is that you can form small groups within it, and then within those small groups you can have those conversations and you can respond to an individual question. So if someone asks there, it doesn't get lost in the process. It also allows you to add files and photos. I also use it for my personally. I call my mother who's in Mexico every now and then through WhatsApp, and whenever we have good connection, it actually works. So it's a good process. It works, but just like any tool, it's all about relationship and continuously connecting with people. The next question, the last question we're going to close it off right now is from Hanja, which is, how are we using ethnic traditional media to target seniors? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? So Chris had to jump off the call at the moment, but I know that we have been working with different media. We currently have a media list, and I think for our end, we are relying on different members and partners to help us either translate some of that information, so it could be accessible outside of the mainstream, whether it's English or Spanish media, to make sure that it's also interpreted into other languages. For seniors, I've also known that phone banking is also one of the best tactics to make sure that people talk with seniors, because they do tend to answer their phone more than young folks. Surprised. And then for continuing the process of building relationship around media is also, in our opinion, like organizing and training with seniors. There's a lot of seniors that actually do want to like still participate out there and being able to speak with media. So hearing from other seniors while they're telling their stories is also very, very important. And before we jump into next steps, I believe it's Hanja's birthday today. So happy birthday. Thank you for that question. Yeah. Raise the roof. The last thing we want to go through is what are the next steps going to look like. So as you take a look at this, we have a shifting 2020 census tactics. So we want to hear from all of you on what y'all are working on, especially as Census Week, y'all know is coming up next week. Now it really does feel like April 1st is the April Fool's thing, now that we're all stuck in our houses and it's Census Day. So now it's the biggest irony I can think of, but it is here. It's right around the corner. It's happening next Wednesday. And we know that we have to change all our tactics as we're moving forward. So we want to know what y'all are doing, and we want to be able to support it as much as we can from our end, from not only from our resources or just partnering up and scheduling. The second thing we want to make sure is that you go to houstonaction.org, for more events and trainings. As we continue to develop all these trainings, everyone who's on our mailing list will get an email. If you're on our Basecamp, it will be uploaded there too. And folks who might not have access to any of that can go and register through houstonaction.org. All you have to do is click on events, and you'll see everything that's happening around in the neighborhood. Trainings will be hosted by HiA calendar. I'm still working on the calendar. My goal is to have a calendar that lasts all the way to the end of April, where we're doing continuous census training. So keep an eye out for that. Once they're scheduled, it will be on our event page. Our big goal is also to uplift whatever trainings y'all are doing. So the more we know that you're doing, the more we can support, like we mentioned, through Zoom, the more access to Zoom, access to our phone banking systems, the more we know what y'all need support with, the more we can support you. So Census Week is next week. From the organizers, I've been asked to see what y'all are working on, from our outreach team, what you're working on, and our members too. So that way we can help coordinate. We have a vision that if we know every Facebook Live video that's happening out there, we can help schedule it. So that way we're not competing for the audience either. So my goal is to make sure to follow up with people in my team to know, like, if you're hosting if 4 teams are hosting a Facebook Live video on Thursday, do some of them partner up, or do some of them use at different times so different audiences can join into the Facebook Live video? So it's going to be a very impressive and busy week next week, and we're going to be doing a lot of work. But I want to thank all of the presenters who came in, Maria, Leslie, Erica, Lisa. Thank you all, are amazing. Thank you so much, Adrian, Maria from Interfaith Ministries, and Zenan, of course, for all your support in making this happen. We're only as strong as our team members are who are here present, so we really do thank you. If there's any other questions, please still add them in the chat box. Since we didn't get a chance to answer all of them, we'll make sure to follow up and with the best response we can, especially to the folks who had questions around the direct mailing. Well, this concludes your training for today. So we want to thank all of you again. Hope you all have an amazing rest of your Wednesday, and stay at home, stay safe, stay clean, wash your hands, wash your face. All right, take it easy.